Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. I am so excited to be chatting with Christina of Pearl and Thistle about how fertility awareness should be part of our basic sex education as young women. And we're talking a little bit about what we as individuals, what we as parents can do to improve this space. So on that, let's get started. All right. We are welcoming Christina. Is it Valenzuela? Is that?
Valenzuela, yeah.
Valenzuela? Okay. My Spanish is extremely rusty, so. Awesome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here, Ellen. I'm really jazzed about what we're going to be talking about today and so happy to be talking with you. So thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so we were just talking about how this area that we're talking about is really a passion area for both of us. And what we're talking about, if you didn't see it from the title of this episode, is, why fertility awareness isn't taught earlier, why it's not, more widespread and not even really like a specific method and rules and things like that, but just the understanding, especially for young women who are, just starting their cycle and, it should just be part of that general kind of education of like, hey, you're going to have, a period that comes once a month, but let's extend that conversation. Let's talk a little bit more about exactly why that's happening, what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, could you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, Christina, a little bit about your organization, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So my name is Christina. I have been married for 11 years. We have 4 children. And back in 2013, I trained as a natural family planning instructor through the Archdiocese of Boston in a method called Boston Crosscheck. Now, if you would have told me 15 years ago that I would be an NFP instructor, I probably would have laughed at you because this was not something that I had on my radar. It wasn't really anything that I was interested in. I barely knew what it was and was kind of grossed out by what I did know. So obviously God has a sense of humor in how he kind of brings things around for you. It wasn't until I had a client actually ended up being a college connection. And we got onto a Zoom and we're like, wait a minute, I know you. We both had different last names. And I was like, oh, sure. But we had been in undergrad together and had studied biology pre-med is how we had started off. And she said, oh, well, this makes total sense because you ended up being a theology major, but you had this biology passion to start. So this is a perfect thing for you. And I kind of went, oh, I never made that connection before, but you're totally right. Thank you. So it's a very roundabout way of getting to this work. And so I had spent a lot of time working in campus ministries and parishes, doing the NFP stuff very, very part-time on the side. And eventually I left parish work to try and focus more to be full-time at home with the kids and just put myself out there a little bit more on some internet groups. And wow, I had no idea the demand that is out there for instructors. So it's become full-time work for me. So I do natural family planning instruction. And then the piece that we're going to talk about today really is something that's a little bit newer to me, which is teaching body literacy and all about menstrual cycles to girls, to tweens. So pre-menarchical girls are kind of my passion right now, getting girls to understand their cycles before they start their periods. And then kind of going on to teens, I have a workshop for teens as well to learn how to do some basics of charting. That's all kind of new to my business and is an area I'm still exploring and learning and growing more passionate about actually as the months have gone on. So in addition to that, I also do speaking engagements and parish resources and things like that. But that's really the bulk of it is the fertility and then the cycle education component.
Yeah. And that cycle education component is something that there is a big hole right now for it. And I was just talking last night with some friends of mine, and we were just talking about how like, why don't we know about fertility awareness and NFP like until we get engaged? Like, why is it that suddenly when we're, a year, 6 months away from getting married, now we're learning, hey, there's this whole component, first of all, about your biology, and second of all, about, how you can work, with God in planning your family. And it's just like, it's such a detriment to our society that we're not talking about it sooner. So I'm so glad that you have said yes to this, and that you are like really exploring this area and creating some incredible resources. Can we talk a little bit about that cycle prep workshop that you have?
Yeah. So that's the new body literacy course that I have. It's called Cycle Prep, and www.cycleprep.com. You can find it. I do live workshops via Zoom every couple of months, but now I have a self-paced online course. And it's really motivated by kind of a number of factors. The first is just really wanting to make sure that girls get a solid scientific background of what's happening in their cycle. I think, a lot of times when we're teaching girls about puberty, we have to teach them about periods because that's what they'll see. That's what they'll experience. But if we don't put it in the broader context of the whole cycle and what's going on to your body and all of these other changes that are happening, then we kind of lose really our ability to help them navigate periods, I think, in a positive way. If they don't have context for it, then it's just seen as like a really obtrusive thing, rather than something that's indicative of a healthy process going on throughout their bodies. So that's the first thing. The other thing is really wanting this learning experience to be guided by the parents. So I'm a professional, I'm an educator, I'm an expert in the field. But I really have a desire to equip parents to be these primary navigators of puberty. And so Cycle Prep is designed explicitly to be done parent and daughter together, or mother figure, or whoever's going to be navigating this with the young girl, so that she knows that she has someone there for her, and they have a shared experience. So they have some shared vocabulary and shared things to go back to when they want to continue the conversations. The other motivating factor is really feeling like we have to learn how to be our best advocates in doctors' offices and in our own medical treatment. And so Cycle Prep kind of talks about what is normal, what is healthy for girls to see, and then also what are some key indicators that you might want to talk to a doctor, and how would you navigate that conversation in a productive way. And then that all leads to kind of the culmination is like, let's create a culture of care surrounding menstruation and cycles. This is how it ends. Care for yourself, learn to respect your body and what your body is telling you, and listen to that and honor that, but then also extend care and help and assistance to other girls, because it's so easy to feel alone. Periods are a private thing, but that doesn't mean that they have to be taboo. And that definitely doesn't mean that they have to be shameful, or that we have to be afraid to offer help to other people. Like share, put together a period kit and like share materials with your friends, or like offer a girl your sweatshirt to cover up a blood stain or whatever, we can do that for each other. And I think our natural inclination is maybe to shy away from that. But I want to encourage girls and parents to really build a culture of care, so that we have the expectation that we're not alone, that we can ask for help, that we can offer help, and be empowered through that together. So that's what I do in Cycle Prep. It's my real passion. And I think that it has just been, for me, an important thing as my daughters are getting older and kind of coming into this space of puberty, that, I wanted to have something set up that I could give to them. And so that was really the driving force for it all.
That is so incredible. Like, I just want to touch on a few things that you said in there, because I was just like, as you were saying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes. And like, one of the things that you said right at the beginning was that, periods can kind of feel like this obtrusive thing.
Yes.
And I honestly, I remember that from when I was, I don't know, 12, 13. I don't know exactly what age I was, but I had no idea. I mean, like, my basic conversation with my mom was like, hey, you're going to have this period. It's going to come like once a month,
Yeah.
whatever. And like, here's ibuprofen. Like that
Right.
was pretty much it. um, and like, I remember being introduced to charting for the first time, and it wasn't like actual charting. It was like a, sort of rhythm method, calculation app that my friends were like, oh yeah, you like put in the days that you like have your period, and it'll alert you a couple days before you're going to get your next one. And my mind was like blown away that you could even calculate out like, oh, when might I possibly expect my period? Mm-hmm. And so, just the fact that you are in this space of empowering young women to understand, what really the cycle looks like, and how they can expect it, how they can prepare for it. And I love the idea of, having a period kit, like being ready for your friends.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh, like, okay, my period hasn't started, but like, I have this period kit in my backpack. Like, I can help you out, Mm-hmm. That's just incredible.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's the motivating factor. I mean, and I think what you're saying is, we tend to get some education on this because we have to, right? But unless you're really given the tools to assess like what's healthy for me, right? It's so easy to just feel like this is all just going to be a surprise. And, and then we get into, I mean, this is maybe another tangent we could go off onto, but like comparing with our friends, like, did you get yours?
Oh,
I haven't gotten mine yet. Or like, oh, yours is every 30 days. Like, oh no, mine's every 35 days. What's wrong with me? Or like, we have all these anxieties as girls because we're just not taught the science behind it and like the why of what happens. And so we can get hung up on little things and worrying about little things that we don't have to. We really don't have to.
Right. And especially like the understanding of, it takes 6 to 7 years for, a cycle to really mature. And then it's totally normal to have, have one period and then not have one for a couple, like for kind of a longer period of time, and then have another, those things are completely normal, but it's not taught normally.
No, it's not. Yeah. And that's really where my idea of like cycle prep, when I was coming up with names for this, I was like, I was like, cycle training, like I train girls to learn about their cycle. Like that was a big debate for me, because another point that I make is that like in the first few years, your body is learning how to do this. It kind of rubs me the wrong way when somebody makes a big deal about a little girl getting her first period and she says, you're a woman now, like you're ready to have babies. And I'm like, no, she's not. Her body is practicing this. It needs years to fine tune this cycle. And so that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I know it's well intentioned when people do that, and it's supposed to be a nice kind of rite of passage sort of thing. But I think it also puts pressure on us, because if that's the narrative that we hear, that like, oh, now you're a woman. But if you're 9, you're not a woman. And
right.
you know it, and
you're 9 years old.
It, and so, or if you're 15 and you don't have your cycle, you're like, I'm not a woman yet, right? So again, just this basic education about what does it actually mean when we start our cycle, right? Biologically, what's going on, and kind of taking away some of the cultural expectations we have or want to slough off about cycles is also, well, I hope has the potential to be really empowering to girls and freeing in a way that some of the other narratives we've built for ourselves are not.
I could really see how it would be incredibly freeing. I in this whole conversation, I'm just putting myself back at, let's just say it was 13. I don't actually remember, but it would have been really empowering to, understand, hey, for a couple of years, your cycle might not be super normal. And what is normal? What does that word even mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And I love the, the mission that you have of empowering. And that word is such a powerful word, but, we put these labels on ourselves, particularly as women, but I mean, really when we're that age, when we're in like junior high age, and those labels mean everything to us. And
Yes.
the only thing we want to be is normal. We just want to be normal. Um, and so, understanding that normal means a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
that peace of mind, I think, would mean everything to these young girls who are, prepping for their cycle. I love the name, by the way. I'm glad you
Oh,
chose that name.
good. Good.
I think it's perfect.
Oh, good. I liked it too. Short and sweet. Yeah.
Awesome. I realize I'm looking at the questions I wanted to ask you, and this next question I think we kind of covered, but I'm going to ask it just in case there was anything else you wanted to add in there. Like, why do you think it's important for teens to understand their menstrual cycle?
Oh gosh. Yeah, we've said a lot of it already, but as I've been pondering this more and more, um, a lot of the motivation, yeah, it was immediate motivation because my daughters are getting to be this age, but it was also kind of this response, having worked with adult women, um, for many years now, and having them just, it's a constant refrain. If you work in natural family planning or fertility awareness, grown women will come to you and say, like, why didn't I learn this before? We just have this information gap, this knowledge gap about ourselves. And so, I think that part of it is just we as a society are suffering in a lot of ways because of this lack of knowledge. We could psychoanalyze things to death, maybe, but I think our society in general suffers from this complete lack of identity in what does it mean to be a girl or a woman or a boy or a man these days. These are big societal questions that we're asking ourselves. And I think part of it is, if the narrative is periods are bad, cycles are obtrusive, cycles are an impediment to living a full life, right? Then we're making it a lot harder for young girls to embrace body changes in any sort of positive way. Because puberty is inherently this disorienting event, right? Your body's changing, your brain is changing, the chemicals are changing, right? It's not a comfortable thing to go through. I don't think anybody goes through puberty and it's like, that was great.
That was so fun.
Oh my gosh, I totally want to go back to puberty. It was so much fun.
I've heard that like puberty is the armpit of life.
Oh, that sounds about right. Yeah. It's just, and that's so apt in so many ways. But that's why I think that, like, if we have just the reality of puberty being uncomfortable, with young girls being uncomfortable in their changing bodies, and this societal narrative which says, like, oh, by the way, for the rest of your life, all this stuff that makes you a woman, it's going to be an impediment to your happiness. I think we need to just tear up that script right now. That I think the answer is to show girls, like, yeah, this could be uncomfortable for a little while, and it's because you're changing and your body's training to do something that's really important and complicated, but you'll get through it. And here's how we're going to navigate it. And here's how you can better understand these hormones and these mood changes that happen throughout the cycle that are not just connected with your period. So that's a very lengthy way of saying that I also think that there are some societal issues that we can address with knowledge about, what makes us male and female, and learning to value that difference rather than trying to hide it under a rock somewhere and never deal with it again.
Oh my gosh. Yes. One of the things I thought of when you were saying, like, if we can teach girls that this change is normal, and yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's very normal, and that this change can be very empowering. How much better would that affect us as women later in life when we are postpartum and can't lose weight, or we're going through menopause and suddenly things are just not going the same? Like, if we were empowered from the start that, change happens, our bodies are very, very good, and they're doing the things that they're supposed to do. And that, this change might be uncomfortable, but it's okay. How much better of a self-image would we have of ourselves later in life?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just to make it a little bit personal anecdote, I've been thinking a lot about body positivity. How do how do I in my cycle prep programs make sure that what I say is positive?
Mm.
That we're enforcing this idea of your body is good. Your body is trying to do this healthy thing, that blood is a healthy sign. I reinforce that with the girls, that this is a different sort of blood, right? That this is a healthy sign that your body has done a lot of work. And I have always suffered from really heavy periods. This was part of my issue growing up, was that I felt lied to, that I didn't have an idea of
Oh,
what was normal, and so I was angry and bitter about that. And it wasn't until I started putting together this cycle prep program and really putting together this script in my head of what I wanted to tell girls, that I had a period and it was really heavy. And my thought was, wow, my body did all that work. And I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I had never had that thought before until I actually started being explicit about saying that to other people. And so that's what I want to give to girls is, you don't have to love your period. You don't have to like have a celebration every time you get it, whatever. But if you can at least tell yourself like, wow, I respect the work that my body did in order to produce this, then you're setting yourself up for a positive sense of self, in not only just with cycles, but just in general.
yeah.
Learning how to appreciate who you are and what your body does at a very basic level.
And if we have this appreciation as we're beginning to cycle as women, or young girls at that point, if we have this appreciation, then the question of like starting hormonal birth control is like not even a question. If we understand really what that cycle means and how healthy it is for our body to cycle. I mean,
Yes.
I just feel like I learn every single day of like some other benefit of ovulation and how it helps with your bone health and it helps with your, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like that question that comes up in the doctor's office of like, okay, well, let's get you on the pill, is like, no, I would never want to do that. This is healthy for my body. Like,
Well, and this is where I think also just, the mission of equipping parents and daughters to be able to know what's normal and what's not, because I think that we're taught to think that we need to have cycles every month. And as you already alluded to, it takes many years for girls to get onto a regular, predictable ovulatory rhythm. And, I've had mothers message me and say, oh, well, the doctor was saying that my daughter should get on birth control to regulate her cycles. What do you think? And I can tell that moment, like, your doctor probably means really well, but what your doctor is forgetting is this, this, and this. And so what I also want to just kind of challenge that assumption or that practice that we all need to be 30 days regular all the time. And that the way to regulate cycles is by taking them away with birth control. I mean, I know that's a very sensitive topic because there are medical issues that kind of require hormonal intervention sometimes. And I don't want to sound like no one should ever do that to take care of their bodies. But I think that we assume that the default correction is always just birth control, and we offer it to girls because that's what's expected and that's what's normal. And you're right. We absolutely need to insist that like, no, ovulation is what's normal and what is healthy for us. So whatever we can do to make sure that we're ovulating, that would be great. Thanks.
right. Let's say that in our doctor's appointments next.
Yeah. Could you just make sure that I'm ovulating? Because if so, we're good. Like,
yeah, that's what I'm looking for here.
Yeah. Ovulate. Good.
Oh man. So, why do you think this is something that's not commonly taught?
I have a lot of theories about this, and I think that there are a lot of reasons. The first one is simply that we don't know it. That, as I said before, I think there's an information gap, and it can span generations where like we just haven't been taught it, and therefore we don't know how to teach it. That's one thing. I see that changing, and I'm really encouraged by that. I think there are a number of people who are entering into this space and kind of trying to reclaim it. I think there's another fear that girls, especially if they're younger, are not going to understand. Right? We can't give them this detailed science because it's over their head. It's going to overwhelm them. It's going to be too much. Let's just teach them the practical stuff about periods, and then maybe they'll get the other stuff later. And I really want to fight against that. My sense is like, we have the capacity to understand a whole lot. And if you're worried as an educator that your topic is a little bit over the heads of your intended audience, then it's your job to make it accessible to them. So for cycle prep, what I do is, I talked to my daughters and I got their input on things. And I was like, I need some sort of analogy so that the girls can conceptualize the functions of these different hormones throughout the cycle and what's going on. And so for cycle prep, I have this analogy of the kingdom that I use. So there's this special kingdom, and they have a tradition of about once a month, they'll send an invitation for a special guest to come to the castle. And so I talk about the preparations that they make and the different roles that these people play in the kingdom. And then of course the queen is progesterone, right? And so I've kind of so I use all of the scientific terminology, because I don't want to neglect that. But I also give them these little images or these characters to kind of walk through the cycle with, to make it a little more tangible for especially the younger girls, because they're not used to thinking a lot in abstractions, right? And something like body functions going on inside of me are a little abstract, but they understand stories and characters. And so, that's one way. I think we don't teach it because we don't quite know how to teach it. We're afraid that it's too much, but I think there's an answer to that. And then the last thing I think specifically goes maybe more to Catholic circles, which are the people that I work with a lot. And I think there's this fear that if you teach about cycles, you have to teach about things like sex and fertility. And parents are not ready for that. And so they'll shy away from the topic altogether. Which is hard because, you respect the rights of parents to talk about these things when the time is right for them and their child. But I think maybe this sets cycle prep apart a little bit from other programs is that I don't talk about fertility. I definitely don't talk about sex. We talk about the equation of life that could happen in the context of this cycle. So this egg could meet with another special cell called a sperm, and then that would make a baby, but that's not what happens the majority of your life. We're going to talk about the cycle as it is usually experienced, and we move on. But even with my teen charting course, I don't talk explicitly about fertility. I talk about ovulation as a healthy sign. And so I think, what I've wanted to do with cycle prep is to create this space where parents of faith who may not want to immediately have this conversation about sex and fertility can still give this education to their daughters. And this would just be the first step in many conversations that you will have later on, right? It's not going to be a comprehensive sex ed education program because that's not what I think a 9-year-old needs. So, there are a lot of reasons why I think we don't teach it. And so having perceived those reasons, I think what I've tried to do is try to answer some of those objections and say, no, we can do it this way. It is possible. And hopefully it takes off. Hopefully people agree. I think I've got a good system, but we'll see.
Well, I love your idea of the analogy because like I remember, again, I've been in my 13-year-old self this whole time. I remember, being in that like junior high, like sex ed class, and a diagram, handful of diagrams were like up on the, the overhead projector with the little projector slides. Because
we have to put some sort of note in the podcast for your listeners. This is an overhead projector was like PowerPoint, but with markers.
Yeah, I'll put a link to like a picture of an overhead projector if you all don't know what that looks like. But, we had these slides and, they pointed to things and said, this is this thing and this is this thing. And it's like, that all just kind of goes way over your head.
Yes.
And so I love, like, you're completely right that, someone who's say like 9 years old totally understands a story and characters in that story. And it's a story that our body is telling, every whatever, somewhere between 25 and 35 days normally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I love that.
Well, and that goes to your point about you and I were talking about a question of, how do you define body literacy? And I think that's exactly how I would define it, is like learning to read the story of your body. This is what we do. That body literacy is a way for you to be able to observe and to read the signs of your body and to understand, to put together a narrative of what is happening. It's not just about looking at kind of individual biomarkers and, getting some sort of like concrete understanding of the different levels of hormones. No, it's about embracing your personal story and what your cycle is telling you and about your body and about what you need, and your relationships and all sorts of things are tied up with this. So
right.
That's how I would begin answering the question of what is body literacy.
It's funny. I had this thought of, it's like in our culture, in our society, like we get this message all the time of like, everyone's unique, everyone's an individual, like be you, you're amazing. And then we're like, but when it comes to your cycle, you should be on the birth control and pill and have an exactly like 28-day cycle, because that needs to be like standard.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. I feel like there's also, you and I have talked about this kind of in other conversations too. There's a lot of paradoxes in society around what we're saying about our bodies and how we should use our bodies and understand our bodies. And I think this is right where the crux of the matter is. We can start kind of ironing out those discrepancies if we start young.
Right. And I love it. I love that your workshop, particularly the cycle prep workshop that we're talking about, is for pre-menarche girls. Like This is before any of this even starts, before even the doctor is saying, hey, you need to get on the pill to regulate your cycle. Before any of that, we can start really early, empower our girls to, read the story of their body, and love their body and understand how hard it works every, cycle. And I love that. And I'm totally gonna I'm going to take that for myself. Like if I have a really heavy period, it's like, wow, my body worked so hard. Like, good job, body.
Yeah. I'm cramping so much. My body is doing so much work.
Exactly. I love that. I'm totally going to use that for myself. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, this has just been an amazing conversation. I feel like we could keep going on and on and on. And I feel like we should, have another episode where we just continue to hash out these topics, because there's so much more to go into, but I don't want to have, a 3-hour long episode. So
you don't want to,
there are podcasts that have episodes of that length, but I personally have never been interested in those. I don't have that kind of time.
I'm with you. Short and sweet. Man. This is good. Well, and I love your mission, just to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
I love your mission of being able to raise questions. That's really what your podcast is all about. Like, let's raise some questions. We're not going to answer everything today, right? We're going to allow people space to think about these things and to see how they play out in their own lives, and to ponder these things for themselves. I think that's a beautiful gift to give people, especially in this space of body literacy and fertility and all of these questions. So yeah, I'm comfortable leaving some things unsaid for now.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this episode and you have some great ideas on this, or maybe there's a program that you're doing, please reach out to me. I'll put the links in the show notes of different ways, Instagram, email, that you can reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to promote, what you're doing, because again, that's what I'm doing here is I want to expand this conversation. I want this to be a normal conversation that we're having about our fertility and about the normal body functions that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, before we close, I know there was another couple of things you wanted to mention before we close out. So I'll just let you have your.
Yeah, so I just wanted to invite anybody who is listening. If you are an NFP or a FAM instructor, or if you have an organization like a school or a scouting troop or anything, and you would be interested in bringing cycle prep workshops to your community, I have an opportunity to do that through what I am calling care champions, people who help me build a culture of care for girls and women surrounding menstruation and cycles. And I can partner with you to offer discounts to your community. It's free. I'm trying to make this as accessible as possible. And it's just a way for me to kind of reach out into more communities and to make this available and something that people can access, because I think that access can just be an issue sometimes, that there are a number of great programs out there, and I can, right away I can name the Cycle Show and Teen Star and some of the other independent like Teen Femme people that I know are doing this great work. I want to just give them a shout out. And so this is one small way that I can help kind of expand these programs to communities that may not have access to some of the other things. So if you're interested in being a care champion, please reach out to me. Pearl and Thistle is my handle on Instagram and Facebook. www.pearlandthistle.com is how you can connect with me.
Awesome. And those will be in the show notes too. So you don't have to like scramble to find a piece of paper right now. Well, Christina, thank you so much for coming on. I just loved having this conversation. I hope we can, bring you back on again and expand this conversation, have it again.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, for allowing these conversations to happen. It's such a gift. And it's a pleasure to chat with you as well.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to know more about Christina's program called Cycle Prep, links to all of that is in the show notes. If you have comments, questions, concerns, or just want to chat, please reach out to me on Instagram or email. Links to those are in the show notes. My handle is Charting Toward Intimacy. It's pretty easy to find me. Until next time.